or recognized practice. And because of that, of course, there are potential dangers. And we think since it is not standardized or recommended, the practices are either coming from local beliefs, misconceptions, or some other motivations. ARVs generally, the ones which are in current use, they are specifically designed to inhibit the replication of retroviruses. These have been studied for use in human beings. The most common, of course, of the retroviruses, or the most popular, is the human immunodeficiency virus, which causes the AIDS. And that's where most of these drugs have been studied and are approved for use. However, we note that there are other retroviruses in animals. In chicken, the most known of them is the avian leukosis virus and the reticuloendotheliosis virus. And then also in pigs, there is the porcine endogenous retrovirus. So, in principle, since ARVs are, from their mechanism of action, they mostly work on retroviruses, in theory, we would expect that they would ordinarily also be effective in these other retroviruses because the mechanism of action is similar. There has not been formal development, testing, and approval of ARVs for that purpose, which ordinarily would follow a formal, rigorous scientific process and also regulatory requirements. And it will be through this process of development and regulatory approvals that we'll be able to understand how these ARVs would be used in animals, what would be for example, the elimination half-life, do they accumulate in animal tissues? And then from that, we would be able to tell what are the potential residues if they are used in animals. What percentage of these drugs would be, for example, in the meat, what would be in the milk if it is used in milk-producing animals, and what would be the allowable period within which these animals should not be consumed. But because these studies have not been done for ARVs in animals, we do not have accurate scientific data upon which we can talk about some of these points in a more accurate manner. So what is happening in medical practice is what we call off-label use. The drugs have been approved for a different use, but someone is using them for a purpose for which they were not formally approved. And as a drug regulator, we think that off-label use of ARVs in animals without sufficient scientific research, without regulatory approval, and without the supervision of qualified veterinarians raises serious, potentially serious efficacy, safety, and potential for resistance to develop. And there are also, of course, ethical implications because these are drugs which are meant for use in human beings. And so if they are diverted, then we would have to look at the potential public health implications. So some of the potential issues we'd be looking at is that the misuse of the ARVs might contribute to the development of resistance of viral strains in ART-naive individuals. We are talking about people who have not used the ARVs before. So if you keep taking these small quantities in food, and then in case later on you get the virus and you're continuously exposing it to sub-therapeutic doses, you are likely to develop resistance to these ARVs. So in the future, if you need them, then you'll find these ARVs are not working on you because you have already developed resistance. Another issue which is likely to come up is that we have seen the quantities which appear in like in chicken tissue. They are relatively small, but even in small quantities, there are adverse events which can happen from the consumption of those small quantities. If, for example, someone has hypersensitivity to a particular drug, like a favirenz, if you take it even in small quantities in chicken, you can still get a hypersensitivity reaction. So sometimes some of the effects we might be seeing in people, someone is just consuming food, then all of a sudden they get an unexpected reaction. It could be coming from some of these drugs which are being used. And it might be very difficult to, even for a clinician, to link the reaction they are seeing to such drugs, because they actually don't know that there is no association with those drugs at that point when they are doing the assessment. We are looking at, although ARVs in Uganda are mostly distributed by government, for the individual patients, they do not realize that these drugs are actually very expensive. But they are actually very expensive, and they have serious public health implications. If some are being diverted to treatment in animals, it means that some of the affected people who are affected by HIV who need these drugs are likely to miss their doses because people are diverting them for other purposes. Then there are also, of course, issues if you are, these are drugs which we all know are dealing with a disease condition which has no cure, and so they are supporting very many patients. So if they are diverted, still there will be issues with the, especially when they are being used for indications which are unproven or which could be due to mistaken beliefs and misconceptions. So how are farmers getting the ARVs? From our pharmacovigilance system, we are able to detect or to get information about the use of ARVs as early as 2013. So when we got this information, we conducted a study in 2014 to find out if the information we are getting was correct or not. And what we found out from our study was that there was use of ARVs in pigs and chicken. That was in 2014. And unlike some reports which had indicated that they were mostly being used for fattening of pigs, we found that mostly the ARVs, especially that was in northern Uganda, were being used for treatment of African swine fever in pigs. Then there were also reports of use of ARVs in treatment of Newcastle disease in chicken. And as we know, African swine fever is a disease of pigs. Normally people call it, locally they call it pig Ebola. The reason is that it presents with similar symptoms to what people see in Ebola patients, in humans, but it has a very high mortality. In some instances, almost 100% of all the pigs can actually die. And so, farmers were saying, instead of losing their entire herd of pigs, they would want to try anything which they think can help them. And they seem to suggest that whenever they used those ARVs, a number of their pigs would actually recover. But the practices, like we said, there is no standard scientific data, so there are no standardized doses, there are no standardized dosing rates. So because it is from word of mouth from farmer to farmer, the practices from one farmer to another were very different. Some would tell you, I use one tablet for 3 consecutive days. Others would say, I give only one tablet once and it is sufficient. And on where they were obtaining these drugs from, it was reported that some of these drugs were being obtained from those who collected from the health centers, that is patients and their caregivers. And the loopholes that they were utilizing were, if a patient, for example, relocated to another place, then some of their caregivers could continue to get ARVs on their behalf. Then also in the unfortunate cases of death, some caregivers would continue getting getting ARVs even when the patient for which they were getting has already died, which they would divert to for animal use. Then there was also a tendency of some patients to register in more than one center. So you find someone has registered in 3 different places, and then they would get ARVs from different centers. At first, maybe the motivation was not from the discussions, was not to use the ARVs for animals, because I think at some point the ARVs there was some erratic supply in some centers. So people would register multiple centers to make sure that if I miss here, I can get in another center. But then with the time, they found other uses now so they would collect from different centers and use some of them for use in animals. By that time also there were reports of some people trying to befriend healthcare workers to help them access ARVs. And as a result of the above findings, NDA instituted sensitization programs targeting both the public and farmers. We have had a number of radio talk shows, but also we designed specific sensitization programs for farmers and veterinarians at the sub-county level. So we have been moving through the country from sub-county to sub-county, meeting with farmers, trying to tell them about the use of drugs, the dangers which can arise from the misuse of drugs and other related topics. So we have moved to now most of the districts in different parts of the country to sensitize basically farmers at that level of the sub-county and also veterinarians. Additionally, market surveillance and enforcement systems, we have conducted several enforcement activities in different parts of the country to curb the unauthorized possession and use of drugs, including ARVs. Of recent, these operations have been upped, and maybe my senior will tell you, we already have some people who have been prosecuted through the court system, and some of them among the drugs that they had which had been diverted from the system were ARVs. And even within this week, we have had an operation, so one of our seniors will update on some of these issues. So we have had a number of operations from our market surveillance and enforcement that arises out of that. NDA has also been, because one of the things we are looking at is that when drugs accumulate in a healthcare system, whether they are expired or they are damaged, they also become a danger for possible diversion. So we have been guiding, we also have in place a system to make sure that there is proper disposal of unfit drugs. This we work very closely with the UPDF. They have a facility in Nakasongola, with whom we work closely to make sure there is safe disposal of damaged and expired items. Are being taken to address some of the challenges, because as you have seen, some of the challenges are sector-wide. So the Ministry of Health, in relation to the issues that we have talked about, is working on electronic medical records. So every patient will have, once this system is up and running, every patient will have a unique identifier in the electronic medical records. So cases we have been talking about of a patient registering and getting drugs in 3 centers will no longer be possible, because each patient will have a unique identifier. So someone will be able to see that from the system, from the electronic records, this patient has already received their drugs at a different health facility. We are also continuing with the sensitization of farmers, patients, caregivers, veterinarians, and other healthcare workers. We are also emphasizing intelligence gathering, market surveillance, and enforcement to be able to take appropriate actions. We are emphasizing proper disposal of obsolete drugs, those which are unfit for consumption, which are maybe as a result of damage or expiry, as some of the measures which can help to make sure that there are no redundant drugs to be diverted. What are some of the recommendations way forward? We are not going to have, we agree that we are not going to have very easy solutions to address some of these challenges. Because like we have noted, there are no treatments, for example, currently, or other control measures for African swine fever. So to be able to make sure that that problem gets addressed, there is need for the government and other partners to invest in research and development so that we can have remedies for these neglected diseases, especially like African swine fever in pigs. Has no treatment, has no vaccine. So it is a problem that affects farmers and causes heavy economic losses, and yet there isn't really any solution that is available to them. So that is why they are running here and they are trying to find anything that can help them. To fast track the establishment of the Food, Animal and Plant Health Authority, this should help to streamline the system for regulation of food, spanning from farm to fork. So the practices, if we want to make food safe, we can't start only from one end. There has to be a proper regulatory system that manages food from where it is produced from to where it is eaten from. So the entire spectrum of food production and distribution has to be adequately regulated. That's why we think if this authority is fast-tracked, it would help to address some of these challenges. Also, we think the current agencies engaged in food control, like UNBS, like the National Agricultural Chemicals Board, and the Ministry of Agriculture, Animal Industry and Fisheries, can institute more routine checks to verify compliance with the maximum acceptable drug residue levels in food. Today we are talking about ARVs, but it is unlikely that this problem is only limited to ARVs. So we need to look at the solutions which cut across the entire sector. Thank you very much.
Before I hand over to you, Honorable Chair and members, the last point on the way forward, when we talk of residues of drugs, we shouldn't look at it in a narrow, because even you know that we're using drugs to treat the animals. and even some of the drugs we use in human, they are the ones used in, they cut across. But what should, in an ideal situation, I think what is being done, what should be done is that that food should be checked to find out, for example, if you injected that animal with this drug, have you observed the withdrawal period before you slaughter? So that's why they should be checking for residues, not only for narrowing it to ARV, but to quality assurance. Maybe my expert there, can you say something on the supply chain, not only for even the drugs, but even other chemicals that use like pesticides? You should check so that we don't get that. Yeah.
Thank you. The reactions later. We would love to continue with more presentations from you, and after exhausting, then members will react. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson and honorable members. And through my CEO, I would also just want to comment on the quality assurance measures that we need as a country. As my colleague has mentioned earlier, the issue of ARVs is just one of the food contaminant problems in the country, and I think for us to be able to address it, it has to take a holistic approach. It needs a value chain approach, and that is addressing it from the farm to fork. And in this, I think what is important now is to strengthen the various monitoring and surveillance systems that are in place, particularly by the available competent authorities. And importantly, as a country, we may need to put in place what we call a residue monitoring plan, and that will look at the various residues in how we can monitor and control the various residues in food. Not only the ARVs, we have the pesticide residues that are used in controlling agricultural plants. We have the other veterinary drug residues and other contaminants probably from the environment. So a holistic approach, a farm to fork approach is very important. And I think also most importantly, we need to emphasize the issue of collaboration and coordination between the various agencies, because this is not a one-point issue. We find, like, for example, what we are talking about, the ARVs, it has a lot to do with the supply chain of the drugs. It has a lot to do with the health, with the public health monitoring systems. It has to do with the farmers. It has to do with the retailers and the distributors. So it is a value chain approach that we need, a holistic value chain approach to address some of these issues, and also strengthening enforcement. Of course, we know that government is already in the process of establishing a food authority that will provide dedicated services to the regulation of food. But in the meantime, even the authorities that are available, that are operating along the food chain, there is need for collaboration and coordination so that information can be shared, and awareness should be created, and then resources should be pulled up, like I mentioned, where we can put up a national monitoring plan. This plan cannot be done by one institution. It has to involve all the stakeholders so that we know which institution is doing what, which institution is responsible for maybe the testing, the collecting, the monitoring at various levels of the food chain. So I think that is what I wanted to add in, Madam Chair. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Irene. Any other presenter?
When it goes inside the body, what happens? What are you likely to find? Comment on that.
When we consume drugs, the body works very hard to get rid of them. And that can be our body, it could be the animal body. Any body that has the physiology and the biochemistry that drives us to stay alive will fight very hard, and we usually call that collection of molecules that are not supposed to be in the body xenobiotics. So even the drugs, they are part of those xenobiotics. Now, when you take that drug into the body, the liver is one of the key organs that we have that stands for us and tries to fight and break down these kind of molecules. So when it comes to ARVs like efavirenz, it is a xenobiotic. So when you swallow it, the liver is going to try to destroy it, to break it down, so that it can be eliminated from the body. And the reason for that, unlike the food we eat, the body does not see it as a building block. It sees it as a toxin that is supposed to be booted out of the system. So again, for efavirenz, the body attaches what we call hydroxyl groups so that it can make it soluble, and then it eventually gets excreted out of the body. And the likelihood of having this bioaccumulating, especially if it's going to be hydroxylated, can get very minimal. However, there are those other drugs that may bioaccumulate, but without enough science, we cannot be in position to say that this bioaccumulates, this does not. In the end, what you're going to have are very minimal quantities. And in fact, some scientists have argued, like Ndoboli and colleagues who did a similar study of the abuse of these drugs, they've argued that the levels that are being consumed through food might be minimal and are most likely going to get destroyed even in the process of processing the food, the cooking and all that. And that is why we were very cautious when we were explaining the adverse effects. The adverse effects may need some bit of minimum dose, apart from the sensitivity reactions, which do not require a very high dose, that even minimal content can cause an adverse reaction to happen. So with close interrogation of the science that surrounds drug metabolism and how our bodies fight so hard to get them out of the system, it is unlikely that you're going to have therapeutic doses of these drugs in the food that we eat. Nonetheless, like Irene did present, it is important for the drugs that are routinely used to have the maximum residual levels so that we can be sure that these drugs are not bioaccumulating, or these drugs are not going to be transmitted forward to the human consumer. Yes, thank you.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you very much, committee members and the chair. Indeed, NDA have been trying to do a lot. Indeed, NDA have been trying to do a lot, including community outreaches. And as an organization, it is one of the components where we spend a lot of money to engage the public on various irrational drug use as part of our mandate. But when we go to these communities, some of them are aware of the adverse events or the effects, and some of them would say would not want to see their animals die because the country has purpose to promote agriculture from subsistence to commercial. So those are some of the driving factors. However, we are also very glad and happy to the community that they have engaged in the vigilance. Sometimes whenever they see these illegalities that our colleagues have reported, they give us intelligence information. As I speak, last week, using our intelligence, we had a case of where we followed up and ended up in Nakauka Health Center. As I speak now, the in charge of the Nakauka Health Center 3 and the store keeper are in Luzira. under case GF 22-5/2023. Even yesterday but one, we arrested another group from Wilson Street and also around Equatorial Mall when drugs were being sold on the black market. So we arrested people, and this case is under CID headquarters, Chibuli. So we continue to engage various stakeholders, but as you have said, when such information gets out, it can have serious impacts on our national trade. So those are also critical areas that we need to discuss, and some researchers have also indicated that it may not be solely the Ugandan problem. This practice has also been identified in other EAC countries. Thank you very much.
Maybe lastly,
Thank you for that presentation. Yes, Mr. David,
yes, what is where the government, I think, has decided to form a food agency. You know, as you're aware, in most countries, it is food and the drug. Here, in the government, in its wisdom, has decided to form that food and veterinary drug agency. So we pray that it is approved so fast so that it can take over. Of course, agencies are doing this. MAIF, UNBS, they are doing this, but we think that if this agency is formed, it will really concentrate on more of these, because these are mostly the food, picking samples routinely, like the way we do on drugs, picking samples here and there. So we are aware that these agencies are doing the work, but I think more can be done when this agency is established. Thank you very much.
Thank you, National Drug Authority Secretary, for this presentation. Before I proceed, I would like to have our own colleague who came later to introduce himself. Honorable.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I came a bit late. Good morning, the team from National Drug Authority. My name is Leku Joel. I represent the people of Terego West, and I'm a member of this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Joel. Members, if you remember very well, we had this issue for quite a while, and last week we had a presentation from the Department of Pharmacy, the people who did the analysis or the research, and found that there was misuse of drugs, particularly ARVs, and they came and made a presentation with us. Today we have National Drug Authority. Honorable Joel, because you came late, I'm recapping for you. You have all heard about the presentation. You have heard from the members of National Drug Authority. I was requesting to know whether Mr. David is representing the Executive Director of National Drug Authority, or you, because that was the person we were supposed to interface with. But if you are representing him, then we would love to hear from you as you make that clarification.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable. I'm the Secretary of Drug Authority. That is the title. The other titles don't exist.
It does not exist, okay? Because this is what the chairperson left behind. She actually sent it through a courier to the clerk. So I'm following what is here.
Yeah,
maybe that was an oversight from her, or she was not well guided on your title.
In fact,
sorry for that.
If we were to be legalistic, maybe I would not patriotic, I would not have come. But I know people don't know this title. But I know I am the personal secretary. I have to come. I'm saying on that because it is serious. They had legal challenges because of using the other title you had given, and it's a serious one. So that's why I stick to that.
Okay. Thank you. Honorable members, we have heard a number of things from our presenters. Before I open the debate or your responses or discussions, I would like to know from Mr. The Senior Inspector for Drugs, Mr. Your name again, sir? Mr. You earlier on said National Drug Authority knew about the presence of ARVs way back. Presence of ARVs in chicken and pigs way back in 2013, 2014. When you knew about this, you clearly said you didn't want to alarm the country. Did you think at any one point that this would come out? And did you think about the community, the citizens of this country, in regard to the effects of this drug? Much as your co-presenter said, the effect is quite minimal. I want to pose a question that when we had presentations made by the Department of Makerere University, they clearly made it to us that they alluded that when drugs are heated, the chemical reactions changes, and when drugs are degraded, the degradants in those medications is toxic to human. And you are saying when these animals, in terms of beef or meat now, when cooked, the level of the toxicity actually reduces. Can you clarify on that again when your time is up? Because the more you heat a drug, the level of its toxicity rises. So these are two controversies that I have noticed. And another thing is that your recommendations, a number of these recommendations, yes, but what are the immediate intervention that you've drawn for the Ugandans who are out there? Immediate solution or intervention or long-term, which you have drawn to help Ugandans, because we are seeing we need to do a lot, because this research was done in Wakiso. You have reported about northern Uganda now, where the uses of these drugs are. You have told us sources of the drugs, possible sources which you know. But what about other drugs and other districts within the country? There could be a lot. And we know that you have already said you knew about this in 2013, 2014. You could be having more knowledge of other drugs being abused by the community, and there could be other remedies that you people have. Can you bring that out, or do you think it would be necessary for you to do more research and help Ugandans? So as I expect more questions to arise or clearance from you, I now open the discussions and debate to my colleagues to share with you. Thank you. Yes, Honorable.
Other honorable members and the visitors who are in front of us here. First of all, when this article came on paper, everybody was concerned, and more so this committee, because already we knew it was already an abuse of this drug. I'm happy that my chairperson aired really what I had in mind, though I'm going to add other things. The first thing that came in my mind, that National Drug Authority knew of this happening since 2013. They went to research in 2014. To date, we are in 2023. And we see that, especially in urban centers, of course, Makerere could not go all over the country. They needed to use a case study, which was done in Wakiso. I want to say this. As Makerere University came out with that report, for you, you knew and kept quiet. But that research helped Makerere to interface this committee. Today also you have come to interface us. In one of the responses, when we are putting down our fears, which fears I believe communities outside there also have the fear, and of course when that report came out, we saw the reaction of many people. Others were saying the research was unfounded, it was not scientific, but I'm happy that you are here also to give support to the findings of Makerere University. One of the things that I have heard now, that the liver works hard to eliminate the toxins from our bodies. And therefore, it brings me to one of the questions. Today, as we talk, there are a lot of cases of liver diseases to our people. Could we say that the liver is failing to eliminate the poisonous substances that the body is taking? Because such a thing used not to be very common. 2, we are talking about controls and measures that should be undertaken. We are all aware as I talk, I come from one of the remotest districts, and already down in those villages, people are using ARVs to fatten their pigs, to give to the birds. And yet these are not for commercial purposes. How are we going to reach out there to educate that man, that farmer, who has never gone to school? 3, and I'm going to stop with that. Our madam says that the doctor, normally you go to the communities, you talk to them. How frequent do you do this? Because I believe the people we represent, if ever they have this knowledge, I believe we are going to reduce on these occurrences. So before maybe we leave this sitting, you will give us an assurance, the frequency at which you do this thing, which districts you have ever gone to, and who are the personalities that you used, so that we get clear information about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Agnes. Honorable Ogwale, a minute, let our new member who has just come in introduce himself to our guest. Honorable Salon.
Yes, Honorable Chair and Honorable colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Salongo Kakembo Mikairi Mbwatekamwa. I represent the people of Ente.
Thank you, Honorable Kakembo, for coming in. Better late than never. Before I cross to Honorable Gwale, you talked about community. I would implore you really to go out there and make better communication by using the local government leaders, because you know very few people up country have functional TVs and effective radios. And I would think if we use the human resource in every function, every opportunity, like in churches, in any gathering, to pass the information to the community out there, I would think the message would get faster than waiting from the center, giving a communication through the radio, and people are in the garden. People don't have radios. Others have TVs, but they are not functional, maybe because they have failed to pay subscription fee. So if we are to utilize that method of community discipline by creating that awareness and sensitization, we need to go robust by using other possibilities of using other method of communication. Honorable Gwale?
First of all, need to thank very much the team or the guest for the presentation they have made. And it has given some light on some of the questions that we have. However, that your system basically has a good system of or good measures of handling the drugs in the country. Right from day one that you receive in your stores up to the last that I consume as a patient. I believe we have that system of measurement of all the measurements and everything. Coming to the animals, like it's a little bit a disappointment at the same time when you discovered this early enough, then now we are here discussing of the same thing. We believed that you would have already informed the country and the country would be aware of this. And then those, in quotations, people who misuse the drugs should have been by now be aware and say, I think we're on the wrong way. To be honest, not to lie, it's countrywide, not only one region, not only one sub-country, whatever you mention. It's countrywide, as Uganda. These drugs are used on animals. There's no lie over that. There's no forgery over that. There's nothing that we've just started hearing this. Personally, I have one of the veterinary officers who is using these ARV drugs on the animals, cows. He goes to buy cows all the way from Karamoja. You know Karamoja, there are those thin cows. All the way from Karamoja, brings them there. It's his business and gives them these drugs. 6 months, a very healthy, fat animal, sells them, goes back there. So I brought that as an example to bring your attention that actually either the systems of monitoring you are not committed, or there is a gap in between there that you people are not open, which you will actually need to know why are these drugs being misused. Looking at that, probably people go and pick drugs from health centers, and probably the users, and then they give the animals. That I say no, I am not accepting on that. Because personally, why I'm not accepting on that, I can give an example. A family I come from, my own father became a patient in 1992. And in all those days of 1992, 90s, when this thing really came, it was not easy. He started his treatment from in Zambia Hospital. But when these drug centers were established, it was a tug of war for us to transfer him to Mbale. Now, when you say that drugs are picked from the centers, the patients themselves sometimes even go to the centers, some of these centers, and get the drugs not delivered. But after some short few days, and then the drugs are delivered. So I doubt whether if I'm sick, I can get my drug to give an animal, and then I remain untreated. So that's why I'm saying that I can't accept on that. There